So this is my dad's story, and just to explain, he's ex-British Army and not scared of anything, and super practical. So, he became a lorry driver about 1975, I think, and this was not long after he started. So this happened about 5 a.m. on a summer's day. It was a bit misty like you get some mornings early, but it was bright and he was heading out of London on the A3. He's driving his lorry and up ahead was a young woman, early 20s in a long blue dress, just standing by the side of the road. It must have been before the A3 was duelled and all the barriers were put up. Anyway, so Dad sees her and thinks that she's just waiting for a ride to work or something. But just as he's about to pass her, though, she jumps in front of his lorry and he immediately slams on the brakes as he's sure that he's hit her now. But he didn't feel a bang, but where else could she have been, right? A couple of cars stop to see what's going on and Dad shakily explains what happened, and the drivers kindly offer to stay while he looks for her under the lorry. But Dad looks and she's not there. Other drivers look and there's nothing. No body, no blood, and no sign of anyone. They all freak out a bit because they saw the woman too, and then just decide to leave because it was the best idea that they had. He still can't explain it, and he knows that she was there and he even hit her. And he spent the rest of his driving career avoiding that route. So, I haven't actually told anyone about my experience with the ghosts at my dad's old house, and I haven't formally discussed it in years, I think. But my dad bought a beautiful home back in 2004 and 2005 that had a huge backyard and rested in a quiet neighborhood. The area had no historical significance that I'm aware of, but I've not researched anything since living there, so I'm not too sure. After moving in, I explored the backyard a couple of times and I found a path out in the middle of the garden that looked old. If you followed it, it led to this old run-down shed, or at least remnants of some shed of some sort. I always felt like there was some connection with our house or property to this old run-down shed hidden in the woods too, but I could just never really explain it. My dad and I were not believers in ghosts or anything, as he was raised Catholic by his parents and he raised me the same way. We didn't watch any paranormal shows, but we did watch a scary movie or two that we enjoyed once in a while. At the time my dad purchased this house, he got married shortly after that to his wife and she brought along her younger son. They moved in with my dad and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Over the next year, their marriage was failing terribly, to say the least. Lots of fighting was occurring, and I was always filled in by my stepbrother when I came over on the weekends to visit. I'll never forget a night when I went into the kitchen and my stepbrother followed me in like usual. He discussed the possibility of divorce with my dad and his mum, but also brought up some really weird things that had been happening around the house. He described to me that he would be playing video games with his door open, and he kept seeing things out of the corner of his eye. He also said that he would hear someone walking around on the carpet in the hallway, but no one would be there. I immediately dismissed everything he told me, though, because I thought that he was just trying to scare me or something. Fast forward a couple of weeks later, and my dad's now ex-wife moved out of our house and took her son with her. We had some empty rooms in our house now, with one being right next to my bedroom. The house was laid out very long horizontally, if that makes sense. My bedroom and the guest was on one side of the house, the living room and the kitchen in between, and then the other side of the house had my dad's room and another guest room. There was just one long hallway that connected the two sides of the house, and I came to eventually despise it too. So I began to see things out of the corner of my eyes when I visited my dad too. Just sudden things moving, and by the time I looked there was nothing there. At night, I would hear sounds of what I didn't want to admit was footsteps in the hallways outside my bedroom, but I had to after a while. Just little weird things that eventually I couldn't ignore any longer. Finally, one weekend, I confront my dad about what I've been experiencing, just to have him confirm the experiences from him too. We began documenting things around the house in a Word document, just for reference, and I wish I still had it, but I lost it at some point. There were shadows, voices, footsteps, lights turning on and off without anyone even being there, and I would be lying if I said that I wasn't scared. I became terrified of the empty room next to my bedroom in particular, as I began to hear people walking around against the wall and talking softly in the room in the middle of the night. I would be so scared that I would stay up all night until the sun came up the next morning, and I blared my radio or TV to drown out the terrifying sounds that I could just never explain. As the activity heightened, I began to share my stories at school with my friends, who began to laugh at everything that I said. One weekend, I planned on having a friend to come see for herself the activity that was occurring in the house. She came inside and made her way to my room, and she dropped her bags off in my bedroom. We came into the living room, which was still very close to my bedroom, and she began to belittle the activity in the house, claiming that it wasn't real. A side note too, since I was terrified of the empty bedroom, I kept the door closed at all times when I was home. So she continued on making fun of me until we heard a doorknob in the hallway turn and the creak of a door open. You bet that I almost needed new pants when I peered down the hallway to find the door to the empty room was half open. The activity in the house escalated, in fact, to the point where my dad and I actually got a local paranormal team associated with TAPS to come and investigate for our peace of mind. And their findings coincided with ours too, and they mentioned that they believed it was all children's spirits. Nothing bad that they can tell was present, and honestly, I never felt like they wanted to hurt me. The activity was always just really playful and was similar to children acting like they would to get attention or something. In fact, we actually ended up catching an EVP of a little girl's voice the weekend of the investigation, and that chilled my body to the core, and still does in fact. Anyway, the activity continued after the investigation too, and I became more restless. It became frustrating for me to visit my dad's house, in fact, and it was really taking a toll on my relationship with him and my personal health. I would be terrified to stay in the house alone, let alone stay the night for the weekend, and I know it's silly to still be scared over children ghosts, but I still don't know who or what they were. I stayed a typical weekend at my dad's, and this weekend, I was absolutely terrified with heightened levels of activity. And at that point, I was done. I was done being scared and keeping my rosary on my doorknob, and I was done being too scared to go to sleep. So one night, I came out into the dark hallway in the middle of the night, and I thrusted myself into the dark, empty room next to mine. I switched on the lights and yelled out forcefully, "You're not allowed to scare me anymore. You're not welcome here. You need to leave. You need to move on and go find your own family and leave me alone." My heart was pounding as I ran out of the room and quickly switched off the lights and slammed that door shut. What happened after this, I will never, ever forget. I began to dream that night, and it was not a typical dream. And I'm not sure what to call it, but when I was dreaming, I woke up in my room exactly as I left it when I fell asleep. I looked around my room and saw that my nightlight was on and my radio was still quietly playing. I mean, it literally looked exactly like my room at night, but somehow I knew that I was dreaming or something. So I looked towards my door and watched it slowly open to reveal these 3 children just standing in my doorway looking at me. There was an older girl, maybe around 10, a younger girl, maybe around 5 or 6, and a younger boy, maybe around 5 or 6 as well. And they just sat there, staring at me. And the best way I can describe their look towards me would be the look of people in the 1800s gave when they were taking a picture. They almost looked so sad, but also like they had no emotions at all or something. Their outfits looked to be late 1800s maybe, or early 1900s from what I remember. And they just sat there, staring at me for what seemed like an eternity. Until they just looked down the hallway, turned and walked away. That's where my dream ended, and I frantically woke up in a sweat to just find my room looking exactly like it did in the dream, but my door was closed. I never did get out of bed to check the hallway, and to be honest, I'm glad that I didn't. After that night, all the activity just pretty much ended as far as I can tell from my dad, too. I never did hear anything again at that house, and the tenants after us reported no activity either. But to this day, I'm not sure what I encountered, or I'm not sure if I was actually having a dream or if it was real or not. I've always felt sensitive ever since that experience too, and I always feel like I occasionally have these odd dreams similar to what happened to me in that house. It was just so real, but I knew that I was sleeping. Anyway, let's just say that my dad and we definitely believe in ghosts now to this day, and we still can't explain what happened to us back then. This was back when I was 18 years old, and I'm 21 now, but I'll never forget this house as some of the weirdest experiences ever happened there, and it should be noted too that, one, this is all true, though in my mind I may have just thought that it was creepier than it was. I'd like to know your opinions. And two, our landlords left for a half-a-year vacation the day after renting us the place, and gave us some weird dude's number for any repairs and stuff. Anyway, so my brother, mother, and I moved into a new house. It had a main floor that you would walk into the living room upon opening the door. There was a hallway with a bathroom straight ahead, and on the left were the 2 bedrooms, and on the right another bedroom and an opening to the kitchen. The kitchen then had a backyard and an open doorway, with no door in it, to the basement stairs. This lack of door really struck me as odd because the basement was all done by the former owner by the time that we got there. It used to be an unfinished wreck, but the owner was some sort of lumberyard worker and was good with his hands or something, so it was done by the time that we got there. So the first room was all concrete with closet doors at the bottom of the stairs and a workbench with cupboards. All the windows down there had bars on them, and then you would walk up 2 stairs to a large open carpeted room with an office ceiling tiles to cover the insulation. However, the bathroom in the laundry room was a dingy tiled floor, with a cellar door to open it and 2 coat hooks on the wall. The toilet was busted up as well, and I know that this seems like tedious information, but trust me, it's all relevant. So, upon moving in, it seemed like a steal. My brother, who was 21, and my 18-year-old self were left alone a lot too. This was because my mother either worked late or would sometimes stay at her boyfriend's house, and it all seemed great to us. But I started noticing weird things in the house that kind of freaked me out. The first was that the cellar door in the basement bathroom seemed to have claw marks on it, but they were on the inside. And once I started having concerns about that, it led me to notice the marks from a lock that clearly used to be on the outside of the door. The claw marks were far too high for an animal, but I figured maybe it was just a really big dog or something that the old owner was an asshole to. A few days after being moved in, too, I heard a noise in my closet. When I opened the door, there was a bunch of newspapers on the ground. It was extremely old, and when I looked up, I saw that there was a perfect square hole cut out of the ceiling. I poked my head up with a flashlight, and I couldn't see anything. I wasn't worried that it was a person or anything because, to be quite honest, it was all just rafters up there. Between the rafters were a bunch of old newspapers too, which were apparently used for insulation a long time ago. But that gave me an idea of just how old the house was. And this made me pretty curious about the house, so I started investigating it. I checked each closet and I didn't find anything in the hallway or guest room, but when I checked in my mother's room, my brother had the basement room, I found what looked like seemed to be ceiling. Upon pressing on them, though, a square of ceiling popped up, and it was like some sort of hidden way to the attic or something, and looked as though there was a way to pull yourself up or something. I told my brother about this, along with the claw marks, and he agreed that it was creepy but shrugged it off. I have a pretty wild imagination sometimes, so to be honest, I didn't blame him. So, a few nights pass and I'm pretty settled about things, and my brother just got home from work. We started talking in the kitchen while we were making ourselves dinner, and then all of a sudden, we hear this loud banging from the basement, right on the bottom of the stairs. My brother and I both grabbed the nearest thing that we could find to defend ourselves with, as we were sure that someone had broken in or something. When we get downstairs, the closet doors were all open and the banging had just stopped. We searched everywhere down there, but we couldn't find anyone. My brother then said to me, "Check it out," and the cabinet above the workbench had been shifted. He pulled on the bottom and we realized that it wasn't fastened to the wall. It was just kind of hanging there. He opened the cupboards and tried to punch the backing open, but it just fell right off. Like there was a false backing or something to it. He shined a light down the dark opening in the wall, but it just seemed to stretch on forever. My brother came back out and said that he found these sheets of white powder, that he had brought some with him. God knows why he pulled them out. I mean, it could have been anything, but we closed the cabinet and I put a bar of wood in the handle so that it wouldn't open again. Then we called our mum and our family friend Jim. Jim was actually a big guy and he knew a lot about the city and the construction there. He told us that the powder was probably just baking soda, most likely to cover up some sort of musty smell down there, and that we could actually have a piece of history in our basement. He said that the city used to have a bunch of underground tunnels in this part of town, and that, though most are blocked off, the wind could have still blown through and created that banging noise. I must admit that it was comforting, but still, it was really creepy, and it didn't really explain why all the cupboards were open. And I mean, this wasn't the only instance too. Things would just open that weren't before. We would still hear noises all the time too, and there was always just this feeling in that basement that someone was watching you. So much so that my brother moved into the guest room and out of the basement. It got to the point that my mother was so sick of hearing us complain that she flat out asked the landlords about the previous owner and told them what we told her. And apparently, he was under investigation for a few crimes, but nothing was ever really proven. Well, as you can imagine, after all of this, we moved out of that house pretty damn quickly. This was all over the span of about a month and a few weeks, and I don't ever want to know what made those noises in the house, or why the landlords just left so quick, or why they gave us the number of that super creepy repairman, or what the hell went on in that house. It makes me queasy to think about it still sometimes, but enough time has passed that I thought it may be of interest to you guys, and I felt comfortable enough to share it. I guess it really shows that you can just never really know the history of a place that you may live in. I've always been into the paranormal world. Ever since I was a little kid, one of my favorite things to do was watching horror movies or paranormal TV shows. I used to get scared very, very easily, but that didn't matter to me. I guess I just liked feeling the adrenaline in my body until I got legit goosebumps. Luckily, or possibly not, 2 years ago, I went through a lot of personal stuff and I stopped being frightened of everything involving the paranormal and all sorts of things like that. And since I've always loved that kind of thing and I wasn't scared anymore, I started watching and hearing and reading paranormal stuff at all times, like literally all day, every day just about. Before I stopped being frightened though, I had already experienced some paranormal stuff through the years, but maybe I was just too scared to admit it or openly talk about it. And maybe I'll start writing about them as well, but I wanted to start with this particular experience, and I wanted to share this one. Since I had been involved in paranormal stuff for the last 2 years as well, I guess I kind of attracted all this type of stuff to myself, and things started happening to me. I'm pretty sure that the more you're involved in this stuff, the more vulnerable and susceptible you get to it all. Anyway, so this happened about 2 months ago. I was in San Diego with 3 of my closest friends because we were attending a concert, so we booked a hotel room for all of that. The night before the show, we were pretty tired and we wanted to sleep in early so we could rest as much as we could for the show, so I went to sleep in the same bed as my best friend, and on the other bed, a nightstand separated them, were my 2 other friends. In the middle of the night, I woke up suddenly, and in the corner of the room, I saw this huge black figure that was just staring at me, directly in the eye, and I just sensed this super heavy or dark bad energy around the room or something. I knew instantly that something was really wrong, and my best friend woke up and she was really confused because I grabbed her arm and squeezed it so hard that she started hurting. I don't really recall this act, but she told me to calm down and to stop accusing her of things that she didn't do. She told me that I was telling her to stop staring at me and scaring me, to just let me sleep, and I don't recall telling her any of that, and the only thing that I do remember was seeing this shadow in the room instead, and it was staring right into my eyes. After all the confusion and shouting, we calmed down and we got back into bed, and at this point, none of our other 2 friends had woken up, and they were still sleeping deeply. Admittedly, I was really, really scared, and I think that I've never been more scared in my life, in fact, but I really didn't want to scare her by telling her that I'd just seen something, so I let her go back to sleep. So after a few minutes, I started telling myself to not let this thing get to me and that I wasn't scared anymore. I mean, I know for a fact that if you build up a wall in your mind and don't let it get to you, it really won't, and these things will just go away, so I did that with everything that I had left in me. But as I was telling all of myself this, I sensed a second wave of a super heavy dark energy, and this energy was going towards one of my other 2 friends who was sleeping, the one who was just across the nightstand, in fact. And I knew that this thing had something to do with her. I don't even know how, but I just knew, and there was just this connection, and it was so strong, and just looking at her made me really uncomfortable and scared. A few minutes go by, and I repeated to myself the things that I said before and tried to build a bigger wall in my head, and I did, and eventually all the feelings just went away, and I finally got back to sleep. The morning after, we were getting ready to go to this concert, and I started talking to my best friend about the night before, and I told her and my 2 other friends that I had seen something, and before I got into any details about what I had experienced, the friend that I had sensed this connection with this thing about approached me and told me right to my face that what I had experienced was because of her, that she knew that she allegedly had a demon with her, and sometimes it manifested itself, and that she was really sorry about it, and that I shouldn't be afraid of it, that she wasn't afraid anymore since she had dealt with it for years. The craziest thing about this experience, though, is that I didn't tell her or anybody at that point that I knew that there was a connection between her and this thing that night. I still can't explain how I knew or sensed the connection between them, but the thing is that I knew that it was just true. Later, she also told us that when she was 12 years old, she actually played with a Ouija board by herself, and she thinks that that's where this thing attached itself to her. When I was 8, I would walk home from my town home approximately 10 minutes away from my school. I would be home by myself every day for about an hour and a half, I'd say, because my parents worked and my older brother went to a different school and all that. I always used this alone time to sink into my couch and watch cartoons before my family came home and took over. I actually really enjoyed the alone time, in fact. Also, I was raised in a very Christian home and was very sheltered. I would get into trouble watching Power Rangers sometimes, in fact, because the bad guys were just too evil. I remember being taught that after you die, you either go to heaven or hell. You don't get a say whether you're going or not, so that means that there's no such thing as ghosts. Or so I thought anyway. So one day, after school, I come home to the same routine, but this time, standing in the corner was a dark figure, the height of the doorframe, just staring at me. It looked like a textbook Grim Reaper minus a scythe, and it had a long black tattered robe with skeletal features showing. The most disturbing thing was its grin, though, and it looked like a skeleton, but wore a long grin. Keep in mind that I had never heard of the Nightmare Before Christmas or anything else that I could relate this to. Of course, I was startled by such a horrific sight, but I literally didn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, I was young and all. I remember saying out loud, "Wow, my imagination is just really jacked up." I would just keep calling myself a stupid little kid with a stupid imagination, and it helped me make sense of what I saw, and it made it easier to deal with because I saw something, but a ghost didn't exist. It just had to be my imagination, I thought. I saw it every day after that, too. It would never say a word, but if I looked at it, it would lean its head at me as if it were trying to say, "I see you too." It always left when my family came home, but I saw this thing every day for about 3 months straight. And it started to get more aggressive the more uncomfortable I became. I questioned my sanity every day, of course, just telling myself that it just didn't make sense. I'm seeing a ghost, but how? Because ghosts aren't real. I would say that I don't believe in ghosts because that's what I was taught, but that's a ghost. I didn't understand anything and I was confused, and as days went by, I became just more scared every day. But then, this thing just started cutting me off in places. I would be so uncomfortable that I would want to go to my room upstairs, and then it would move slowly as if underwater and then quickly zip as if teleporting onto the stairway, just leaning over the staircase while looking at me in my face to block me from going to my room. I was literally stuck to my little corner of my couch with this smiling skeleton that wanted something from me. Well, or so I thought. And that's the best way that I could relate how it moved. It was kind of like a ghost from the movie 13 Ghosts. That's actually pretty spot on, in fact. Anyway, I never told my parents or anyone else what I was seeing. I was afraid my parents wouldn't believe a stupid little kid like me, and honestly, I was just afraid of getting in trouble. Plus, it even crossed my mind that this whole situation was just weird. I thought to myself that my brother would just call me gay and tell everyone to make fun of me. But one day, I slowly walked home with about 6 inches of snow on the ground, and I came home and this thing, like every day, was waiting for me. I sat on the couch in fear like always, but this time, it zipped in front of my face, and it took its hands and shrouded them over my face as if it wanted to grab me, and then zipped back. For the first time, I screamed as loud as I could and just ran outside. And eventually, my parents came home and found me outside just sitting in the snow and crying. My parents obviously asked me what was wrong, and the first thing that I said was, "I know I'm a stupid little kid with a stupid imagination, and you're just never going to believe me." But after I told my parents, I expected them to look at each other in disbelief and make me look under my bed for monsters and stuff. They turned to each other and said in a stern voice, "Why didn't you tell us?" And that scared me more than they knew, because they sounded like they knew something. My parents had never told me anything that would scare me before, but this time, my parents told me that they would tell me the God-honest truth as if I was grown. They told me that the people that lived in the house before us had a little girl that was apparently demon-possessed in our house and took her own life. And now, this demon allegedly wanted me. My parents immediately poured baby oil into a cap and prayed over it and put a dab of it in the shape of a cross over every door and window in the house. And after that, I saw it outside of my kitchen window looking in sometimes. That was the first time that I saw it outside too, and then a week after that again, and 2 weeks after that as well, and then after that, I just never saw it again. Whether anyone believes me or not is not really important to me. Whether it was my crazy 8-year-old brain like I thought, or something paranormal, I don't know what it was, but I saw it for 3 months straight, and no one can take that away from me.